Welcome to the next episode of Feltovich Fit, Punching Power. If you don't want to hear me talk and you just want to start training, that's fine. Feel free to skip to the time below. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to develop the physical attributes necessary to throw a punch harder. The inspiration for this video came from one of my instructors, Kelly McCann. He did an excellent series on how to throw the jab more effectively. Since he's been boxing for half a century, if I were to do a series on how to throw a punch, I'd just repeat what he has to say. Instead, I'm going to do something different. Every physical activity is going to involve two things. One is a movement or stabilization pattern, and two is the physical attributes necessary to execute that pattern more effectively. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to develop those physical attributes. I've distilled everything I know about punching hard into 5 principles. The first principle is core, core, core. If you've been watching these videos and following along, you're probably noticing a common theme starting to develop. The second principle is move more weight. Third, move it faster. 4, reverse gears faster. And 5, relax faster. And in this episode, I'll deal with each of those principles in turn. A little bit of a backstory on this episode. I shot much of this workout footage the day before shoulder surgery, which is why I demonstrate several of the techniques with my left side. The reason that I mention that is because I was in a rush to shoot the footage before surgery and rehab, because it'll unfortunately be a while before I'm able to do some of these exercises again. As a consequence of that, I hadn't fully worked out the principles and terminology when I shot this, which is why I abused some terminology and used some terms interchangeably, such as mass and weight and force and power. Fortunately, this channel is Feltovich Fit and not Feltovich Physics, so hopefully you'll forgive me. And hopefully Dr. Scott Willenbrock isn't watching because he might revoke my B in mechanics. I worked out most of those mistakes in the accompanying PDF, so hopefully the science purists will read it before passing judgment. The last thing I'll talk about before we start training is programming. How much, how long, how often. Programming is an art and a science in itself. The most important thing I can stress about speed, strength, and power work is to do it when you're fresh and to stop doing it while you're still fresh. The biggest mistake that people make with speed, strength, and power work is they either do it when they're fatigued or they do it until they're fatigued. It's part of the flawed mindset that more is always better. High impact work has its place, but if you misuse it or overdo it, you'll just slow yourself down and possibly set yourself up for unnecessary damage and injury. I'm an excellent case study on what not to do. Can I have a hand here? Thank you. The head of my humerus looks like the surface of the moon. It should look smooth and shiny. Once your cartilage is gone, it's gone and there's no way to get it back. So keep the high impact work in its proper place and don't try to turn everything into an endurance exercise. There's a better way to build endurance, which will be the topic of my next episode, Endurance Reconsidered, Anti-Glycolytic Training. Enough talking, it's time to train. The first principle of punching power is core, core, core. If you haven't watched my episodes, the Core 101 and the Naked Core on core stability, go back and watch those. If you don't watch those, if you don't understand those principles, then everything else I teach you is going to be a waste of time. Not only will you not benefit, you could possibly be setting yourself up for injury. What do I mean by core stability and punching power? If this position right here isn't reasonably comfortable, you tell me how you're going to effectively throw a punch without bleeding energy. The forces that you generate when you throw a punch are likely multiples of this. So, first step, punching power, you need to build that strong, stable core. Second principle of punching power is move more weight. Physics is very simple. Force equals mass times acceleration. If you want to generate more force, you either got to move more weight or you got to move it faster. We're going to do both, starting with moving more weight. These next exercises represent a progression. Until you master the previous exercise, don't progress to the next exercise. We're going to start off with the basic push-ups. Some people tell me they can do 1,000 push-ups, then I show them how to do one the right way, and they can do like 3. Push-ups, very simple, but there's a lot of detail, and details matter. First, your elbows are in tight to your torso. Second, your torso is in line with your legs. Third, you should be doing a full range of motion. So that's chest to the floor, locking out. Make sure you master these, make sure you're comfortable, doing a basic push-up until you progress to the next variation. If you've mastered the push-up, one possible progression is the one-arm push-up. With all your push-up variations, the challenge is to adhere to all those principles we talked about previously: elbow in tight to the torso, torso in line with the legs. The only thing that's changing in this case is that we're only using one arm. So as I said, everything starts off exactly the same. Then you remove one arm. Recover. The last progression that we're going to discuss today is the one arm, one leg push-up. So if you've mastered the previous exercise, the one arm push-up, you could be ready to progress to this one. All the same principles apply. Elbow in tight to the torso, torso in line with the legs, shoulders and hips parallel to the ground. All you're doing is you're removing one arm and one leg. Everything starts off the same. Remove one arm, one leg. Recover. Third principle of punching power is move it faster. Force equals mass times acceleration. So if you want to generate more force, you either got to move more weight or you got to move it faster. In step 2, we moved more weight. Now we're going to move it faster. To do that, I have a Rogue band. Rogue makes the best bands. I don't have any sponsorship arrangements with Rogue, but I'd like to change that. So if you could gently encourage them to adopt me as a sponsor, I'd appreciate that. I'm going to anchor my Rogue band to my Rogue Echo bike. And I'm going to simulate all the mechanics of a good punch. So I'm in my good fight stance, ready to throw across. The band is going to increase in resistance throughout the entire range of motion, which is going to force you to continue to accelerate throughout the entire range of motion, which is why it's a superior to a static weight for this particular exercise. The fourth principle of punching power is that you have to minimize the amortization phase. That is the phase between the eccentric and the concentric phases of the motion. What do I mean by that? Eccentric means that you're lengthening the muscle under tension. So that's sometimes what we think of as the negative repetition. And then the concentric phase of the motion means we are shortening the muscle under tension. And the amortization phase is the phase in between. And to throw a punch effectively, you want to minimize that phase. And I'm going to give you 3 ways to do that. This principle that we talked about, minimizing the amortization phase, that is the phase between the eccentric and the concentric phases of the motion, that's really the basis of plyometrics. That's where plyometrics comes from. That's the principle that it's based on. The first exercise that I'm going to give you is the clapper push-up. So first, preliminaries, before you attempt to do a clapper push-ups, regular push-ups should be very easy for you. You should have that exercise mastered. For the clapper push-ups, what you're trying to do, I like to pretend the ground is hot lava. If I stay there too long, I'll get burned up. So what you're doing is trying to minimize that contact time with the ground. So that's your first and most basic plyometric exercise to decrease the amortization phase and maximize your punching power. The second exercise that I'm going to give you is the one-arm plyometric push-up from an elevated position. I'm going to use a yoga block. Any sturdy elevated surface will do. What you're doing is you're starting off in a one-arm push-up position. Arm is on the block. Again, that ground is like hot lava. If you stay there too long, it'll get burned up. So that is the basic one-arm elevated plyometric push-up. The last exercise I'm going to show you comes from John Engum. He's a very accomplished martial artist and, in my opinion, the foremost authority on conditioning for martial arts. We're going to be doing his pulsing knuckle push-ups and the leapers. So for the pulsing knuckle push-ups, what we're going to do is first you're going to start off in a knuckle push-up position. So if you haven't mastered knuckle push-ups, that's the place to start. If you have mastered those, then what you're going to do is you're going to pulse 5 to 6 inches off the ground. Repeat. The last exercise I'm going to show you, also from John Ingham, is the leaper. Now, these are going to be very similar to the previous exercise, except you're going to be getting totally airborne. To do these, you should be in excellent shape. You should have mastered all the previous exercises. You should be warmed up, and you should do these when you're fresh. You should not do them at the middle or end of the workout when you're already fatigued. Everything is the same as before, except now you're getting totally airborne. So it's going to look like this. That, my friends, is the mother of all plyometric punching exercises. The fifth principle of punching power is that you got to maximize the rate of excitation and relaxation in the muscle. What do I mean by that? When you throw a punch or really do any physical activity, swing a golf club, etc., there's an initial impulse as you start accelerating the limb, and then when you're doing it properly, the activity in the muscle flatlines. If you were to do electromyogram, look at the electrical activity in the muscle and the nervous system, it flatlines until you make impact, and then you generate that stiffness to transfer all that energy that you've created to the target. And the people who punch effectively, the greatest golfers, the greatest really anything, they have mastered the ability to maximize that rate of excitation, relaxation, and that excitation. If you notice, when boxers late in a match, when they get fatigued, they lose that ability and they start pushing. So instead of that initial impulse, there's activity through the full range of motion as they try to push instead of punch. Now I've probably got you excited. You're probably wondering, how do I get this magical ability to maximize the rate of excitation and relaxation in my muscles? The best way, and really the only way that I know, is through Olympic lifts. The clean and jerk and the snatch, both of which I demonstrate with a kettlebell. Big shout out to my buddy Tom Flint and his students at Kinetic Combatives. I appreciate all the likes and subscriptions. That's what makes this material possible. If you want to hit harder, then a good next step after you watch this video, sign up with the team at Kinetic Combatives. The last thing we're going to punch today is that like and subscribe button. Also, if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to see more of in the future, feel free to leave those in the comments section. Until next time, thank you again. God bless.